Music. Music speaks to our heart like I think nothing else can. Brings back wonderful memories. Sometimes saddens us, sometimes it brings us great joy. So many of us listen to music each and every day, and it's an important part of our lives. That's why so many of us have earphones and sound systems and all that stuff. We must have our music. I've got a nice speaker system in my office here. It was left here for me, and I'm really grateful for it because it sounds really good, and I love that. I also love to listen to music as I'm spending time alone with my headset or my ear pods on. I also enjoy immensely the times when we're able to listen to good music here in this church and in other churches. Well, a pastor decided to visit a member of his congregation one day. This man was a lawyer, and so he stopped by the lawyer's office, and everyone had gone home but this man, the lawyer, who was still working and working late. And he started off the conversation with him by asking him, "How was your day?" He said, "Oh, it was a typical day, full of misery. In the morning, I helped the landlord evict a family from their house so he could clear it out to rent it to someone else. He said everything I did was legal. Not so sure it was all moral, but it was legal. He said by lunchtime I was helping a client avoid his workers' comp insurance payment. Again, it's legal. And this afternoon, I have been helping a woman ruin her husband's life forever with the sweetest divorce settlement you ever saw. That's how my day went." The pastor thought to himself, what can I say? The lawyer said, "That explains why I'm in your church on Sunday morning." The pastor said, "I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I can't even think of what on earth I could say to you or that I might say to you in a sermon on a Sunday morning that might help you." And he said, "Oh, Pastor, you don't have to preach a sermon. I don't get any ideas." He said, "It's the music. I go a whole week with very little beauty, very little good until Sunday. And then Sunday rolls around, and oftentimes when the choir sings, for me, it's the difference between life and death. I do enjoy it so." That may be true for some of you. There are some Sundays when I'm sure the music speaks to your heart as nothing else can. That's why the angels sang and continue to sing in the heavens. That's why they sang when Christ was born. That's why when Mary found out she was pregnant with the Messiah, she broke out in a song. Music can change the world. We sometimes forget the power of music. Music has charms to soothe the savage beast, the poet William Congreve wrote, and it's true. If any of you are country music fans, you recognize the name Travis Tritt. Yeah, I see some heads bobbing. Like many country music stars, Travis Tritt spent a lot of years playing in out-of-the-way beer joints before he ever made it big. And he says that in many of those bars, they were kind of dangerous places, and drunk fans would start fights over stupid little things. But he said that he found a way to keep the peace and to calm things down. Anytime it would get too rowdy, he said, he would stop what he was doing and he would sing Silent Night. Here's how he put it, quote, Silent Night proved to be my all-time lifesaver. Just when the bar fights started getting out of hand, when bikers were reaching for their pool cues and rednecks were heading for the gun rack, I'd start playing Silent Night. It could be the middle of July. I didn't care. Sometimes I swear some of those rowdy bikers would stop and start crying when they heard that song. And they would stand there and watch me sweat and play a Christmas carol for them. Music can do that. It can calm a crowd, or it can speak of the hopes of desperate people who are in need of hope. This year, let's see, it'll celebrate, I believe it was about in 1961 that the Berlin Wall was built. The purpose of the Berlin Wall was to keep the East Germans from escaping to the West. And it did do that for about 28 years. And then, on November 9th of 1989, it was destroyed. It was torn down as quick as it was built. And its destruction was celebrated around the world. Well, months before that wall came down, the citizens of Leipzig in East Germany decided to peacefully protest the imprisonment that they felt behind that wall. Their movement was called the Velvet Revolution. It was a very unusual protest movement. You see, on every Monday night, a large group of citizens of Leipzig would gather at a local church to sing. That's all. Just to sing and pray. But an amazing thing happened. In just 2 months, their numbers grew from 1,000 people to over 300,000 people gathering together. Someone asked a military officer why they didn't silence that protest like they had so many others. His answer was, "We have no contingency plan for prayer and song." Think about it. All of those people singing songs of hope and protest and justice until their songs shook the powers of their nation and changed everything. Prayer and music can do things that nothing else can. Yes, I believe prayer and music can change the world. More than anything else, music gives us hope in hopeless times. That's why people will always sing. Music gives us hope. The movie, The Bridge over River Kwai, was named one of the 100 greatest films of the 20th century. It's a story of some British prisoners of war during World War II who were held by the Japanese in northern Burma under some really, really tough circumstances. Ernest Gordon, who later became a chaplain at Yale, was one of those prisoners. And he wrote a book which was called Through the River of the Kwai, which told how these POWs dealt with the horrible conditions in that POW camp. When these young soldiers realized that they were going to be in prison for a long time, they began to have Bible studies and to pray together. At first, they prayed that they would be delivered. And then when they got to a point where they realized they weren't going to be delivered, maybe never, maybe for a long time, they railed against God for their misfortune. But after a while, something happened to them, and they began to move toward a more mature faith. And they no longer spoke against God. They asked God to help them to be strong through this, rather than asking for the end of it. Gordon said the most spiritual moment of his life was on Christmas of 1944. They were not given work detail that day. They were given the day off, and they were given a little bit of extra food. And so as they moved around the prison yard, they sensed that things were a little bit different that Christmas day. In one of the barracks, one of the soldiers began to sing a Christmas carol. Then they heard it coming from the infirmary, where men were dying. And then all around the camp, men began to sing. And those who could came out to the parade field and sat there in a big circle. And Gordon said, God touched us that day through song. He said it was the most sacred event that he had ever been involved in. No preaching, just men united by the common misery, singing of God being with them. He said, we were touched by God. All they did was sing. Music can do that, can it? Yes, it can. It can remind us that God is with us. Music is one of the greatest gifts that God has given us. To me, it is one of the surest signs that God exists. Does anybody here honestly believe that blind evolution without God involved at all would have given us voices that can blend together as beautifully as they can blend? Without God involved, how could sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses exist and then make those beautiful sounds on this earth that are so beautiful and pleasing to the ear? Music is from God. And I mean all music. If it's music, it's from God. Music can do things that nothing else can do. Music can change the world. Music gives us hope. I hope that you will leave this place today with that hope in your heart, that hope and that song of the gospel ringing in your heart. Amen.